morning my mother told me she was willing to sell the house my younger brothers lived in just to destroy my father, I realized something that shook me to my core. She no longer cared who got hurt. Not my brothers, not me, not even herself. She looked straight into the camera during our video call from Poland. Her face calm in a way that frightened me more than if she had been screaming. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "If I have to lose everything to make him suffer, then so be it." I stared at the screen, unable to recognize the woman, who had spent my entire childhood sacrificing everything for her children. She wanted me to help. Not emotionally, legally, financially. She wanted me to be part of whatever revenge she had already begun planning. When I refused, she looked disappointed. Not angry, disappointed, as if I had failed some invisible test. That conversation ended 23 minutes later. I sat in my kitchen for almost an hour, afterward, while my own children played in the next room, laughing over a puzzle. Their laughter sounded impossibly distant, because all I could think was, how do you save someone who doesn't want to be saved? Stay with me, because this isn't really a story about revenge. It's about what happens when betrayal destroys a person so completely that they stop recognizing the people who still love them. My name is Emily. I'm 33 years old. I've been married for 6 years. My husband and I have 2 beautiful children. We have a quiet life now. Peaceful. Predictable. Sometimes people tell me I'm lucky. They have no idea what peace cost me. To understand why my mother's words terrified me, you need to understand the house I grew up in. My parents met during college in Charlotte, North Carolina. According to every story my grandparents told, they fell in love almost immediately. They married before they had finished school. 9 months later, I was born. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. My father owned several successful restaurants throughout the city. Business was booming. Money flowed easily. My mother managed a small boutique that specialized in imported home decor and gifts. We lived in a large brick house. Every Christmas looked like something from a department store commercial. Every birthday was bigger than the last. I never wondered whether we could afford something, because the answer had always been yes. When the newest Barbie collection came out, I had every doll. When the latest bicycle appeared in stores, it somehow showed up in our garage. Looking back now, I realize my parents weren't wealthy because they were careful. They were wealthy because they were lucky. There's a difference. A very expensive difference. No one invested. No one saved. Money came in. Money went out. My father believed success would last forever. He spent like tomorrow had already promised itself. But what I remember most about those years isn't the money. It's the fighting. Almost every memory from my childhood has shouting somewhere in the background. My father had a temper that could fill an entire house. Sometimes it started over business. Sometimes over bills. Sometimes because dinner was cold. Sometimes for reasons nobody ever understood. He yelled. My mother yelled back. Doors slammed. Plates shattered. More than once. He hit her. As children, my brothers and I became experts at reading silence. We knew exactly when to disappear upstairs. We knew which floorboards squeaked. We knew how to keep our little sister. I had 2 younger brothers, but no sister, so it became my job to comfort them both. Occupied with games so they wouldn't hear everything happening downstairs. No child should learn those skills. Yet we did. When I was about 10 years old, everything changed. One restaurant closed. Then another. Then another. My father insisted it was temporary. Bad economy. Bad timing. Bad employees. Bad luck. There was always another excuse. Then my mother discovered something he had never told us. He had been gambling. Not casually. Not occasionally. Compulsively. Thousands of dollars disappeared every month. Money that should have paid employees. Mortgage payments. School expenses. Instead disappeared into casino accounts. As if that wasn't enough, another tragedy hit our family. One evening, a robbery took place inside my mother's boutique. The young woman working the closing shift was killed. She was only 26. I still remember my mother coming home that night. She didn't cry. She simply sat on the kitchen floor for hours, staring at nothing. After that, she was never quite the same. The boutique never recovered. Insurance covered some losses. Not all. Within 2 years, everything we'd built was gone. The nice cars disappeared first, then vacations, then private school. Eventually, even groceries became a struggle. People who had once called my parents every weekend stopped calling entirely. Success has many friends. Failure usually eats dinner alone. Around that same time, my mother became pregnant again. Twice. Within 4 years, our family grew larger, while our bank account became smaller. She stayed home with the babies. My father drifted deeper into depression. Or maybe guilt. I still don't know which. He rarely left the house. When he did, he often came back angry. By the time I turned 14, we sometimes didn't have enough food. I'm not exaggerating. There were nights when dinner was peanut butter, spread across stale bread, because that's all we had left. Sometimes there wasn't even bread. My parents never asked me to help. They didn't have to. I could see it. So I found a job after school stocking shelves at a neighborhood grocery store. I lied about my age to get hired. Every paycheck went straight into our kitchen drawer. Milk, eggs, diapers, electric bills. Those became my responsibility before I was old enough to drive. I didn't resent it. At least not then. I thought that's what daughters did. I thought families survived together. I thought eventually things would get better. I didn't know yet. That money wasn't the biggest thing my father had been hiding. By the time I turned 18, I had stopped believing home was a place. It was simply somewhere I slept. The shouting never stopped. Neither did the violence. Sometimes my father disappeared for hours without explaining where he had been. Sometimes he stayed home for days, sitting in front of the television without really watching it. The restaurants were gone. The money was gone. But somehow the anger remained. The only thing that kept me going was the idea that someday I could leave. That chance came disguised as love. I met Ethan during my senior year of high school. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He worked construction with his father while taking night classes in engineering. He drove an old pickup truck that rattled every time it started. But whenever he looked at me, I felt safe. And after growing up inside chaos, safety feels like the greatest luxury in the world. We dated for 3 years. When I was accepted into a university nearly 4 hours away, I almost declined. There was no money, no way to pay tuition, no way to afford rent, no way to leave my younger brothers behind. Ethan wouldn't let me give up. "We'll figure it out," he said. And somehow, we did. He worked overtime, picked up weekend jobs, skipped vacations, skipped buying himself almost anything. Every semester, he somehow found another way to make tuition work. I worked too, waiting tables, tutoring, cleaning offices before morning classes. We survived one paycheck at a time. For the first time in my life, hard work actually led somewhere. After graduation, we moved back closer to home. Not because I wanted to, because my younger brothers were still there, still living inside that house, still listening to those same arguments. A year later, Ethan proposed. We married 6 months afterward. We've now been married for 6 years. We have 2 incredible children. Our marriage isn't perfect. No marriage is. But we've never screamed at each other. We've never thrown things. Our children have never hidden in their bedrooms because they're afraid of what they'll hear downstairs. Sometimes I sit in our quiet living room after everyone goes to bed. And I realize this peace is something I had never experienced until adulthood. Meanwhile, nothing changed at my parents' house. They survived by taking temporary jobs. My father repaired restaurant equipment, delivered supplies, worked wherever someone would pay him. My mother cleaned offices, worked retail, anything she could find. They were barely getting by. Yet every conversation somehow ended exactly the same way, with shouting. Looking back now, I honestly don't know why they stayed together. It certainly wasn't because they were happy. Maybe habit is stronger than love. Maybe fear is. Then last year, everything exploded. My mother called me one Tuesday afternoon. Her voice sounded strange. Flat, almost mechanical. She asked me to come over immediately. When I arrived, she handed me an old folder. Inside were photographs, bank records, birth certificates, and one document that changed everything. My father had another child. Not recently, 25 years ago. A son, only 3 years younger than me. Which meant, for almost my entire life, he had been living 2 completely different lives. That wasn't all. Over the following weeks, we learned he hadn't simply had one affair. There had been many. Over decades, different women, different lies, different excuses. The 25-year-old son was simply the secret he could no longer hide. The entire family exploded. Arguments lasted for weeks. Relatives took sides. People cried. People screamed. And then came the revelation that hurt my mother more than my father's betrayal. His family already knew. His sisters knew. His older brother knew. Even worse, some members of my mother's own family had known for years. No one had told her. Everyone had decided it was easier to protect the lie than the woman living inside it. My mother threw my father out that same night. For the first time in decades, he wasn't living in the house. I thought maybe this was finally the beginning of something better. I couldn't have been more wrong. The following 3 months were the darkest I've ever witnessed. My mother barely ate. She barely slept. Some days she didn't leave her bedroom. Other days she wandered through the house talking to herself. She stopped answering friends, stopped going to work, stopped caring whether the lights stayed on. Twice, she attempted to take her own life. Those are memories I still struggle to talk about. My brothers were terrified. I was terrified. Every phone call made my heart race. Eventually, after weeks of begging, I convinced her to leave the country for a while. She chose Poland because an old friend had offered her a job there. I paid for the ticket, helped her pack, held her while she cried at the airport. As the plane disappeared into the clouds, I honestly believed I had saved her life. For several months, things improved. She found work, rented a small apartment, started sleeping again. She smiled during our video calls. Not often, but enough to give me hope. Then, little by little, the conversations changed. At first, she'd casually mention my father. Then she'd ask whether I'd heard anything about him. Eventually, she stopped asking about him and started talking about revenge. I always changed the subject. I refused to encourage it. I assumed it was simply part of grieving. I believed time would heal what anger couldn't. I was wrong. Because one evening, my mother looked directly into the camera and calmly told me she was willing to destroy everything. She still owned, if it meant making my father suffer. For months, I convinced myself my mother was simply grieving. After everything she had endured, who wouldn't? 34 years of marriage. 34 years of lies. An entire second family hidden in plain sight. I kept telling myself that healing wasn't linear. Some days would be better. Some would be worse. What I didn't realize was that she had stopped thinking about healing altogether. She had started thinking about revenge. At first, it sounded harmless. I hope he loses everything. I hope someday he feels what I felt. I hope someone betrays him the way he betrayed me. Those were painful words, but understandable. Then they became more specific. I know people who could ruin his business. I still have documents. I know exactly where it would hurt him the most. Every conversation made me more uncomfortable. I never encouraged her. I never argued either. I simply listened and tried to redirect her thoughts. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes she became angry. One Sunday afternoon while I was folding laundry, she called. She sounded strangely calm, almost cheerful. That frightened me more than her crying ever had. "Emily," she said, "I finally figured it out." Figured what out? How to make him pay. I felt my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "I'm coming back." "For a visit?" "No, for good." I was silent. "I've made my decision." "What decision?" "I'm selling the house." I nearly dropped my phone. "The house?" "The one your brothers live in." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, they're still in college." "I know." "They live there." "I know." "They don't have anywhere else to go." She sighed impatiently. "They're adults. They'll figure something out." My heart started pounding. The house was the only stable thing my younger brothers still had. Selling it wouldn't punish my father. He hadn't lived there for over a year. It would punish her own sons. "Mom, why?" "Because your father still thinks he'll inherit part of it." "He won't." "I don't care. I want him to watch everything disappear." Then she said something I'll never forget. "If I have to burn my own future to destroy his, I will." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I honestly didn't recognize the woman on the screen. This wasn't the mother who worked double shifts so we could eat. This wasn't the woman who skipped meals so her children wouldn't have to. This was someone consumed by pain. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. "I need your help." "My help?" "You're better with paperwork." "I need someone I can trust." "I need you beside me." I already knew what my answer would be. "No." She blinked. "What?" "I can't." "You won't?" "I won't." Her expression hardened. "He's your father." "No. He's the man who destroyed our family." "I know." "So why are you protecting him?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not protecting him. I'm protecting myself. And I'm protecting my children." She shook her head. "You don't understand." "No, Mom. I understand perfectly. I spent my entire childhood watching two people destroy themselves. I'm not letting my children grow up watching another generation do the same." She didn't answer. So I continued. "I don't love Dad. I don't even hate him. I honestly feel nothing." That was the strangest realization of all. People always say the opposite of love is hate. It isn't. It's indifference. My father had been emotionally absent for so many years that by the time the truth came out, There was nothing left inside me for him. No anger, no grief, just emptiness. I don't want revenge, I told her quietly. I want peace. She looked away from the camera. Then she whispered, peace is for people who weren't betrayed. No, peace is for people who decide they're finished being, controlled by what someone else did. She ended the call without saying goodbye. I cried afterward. Not because we argued, because I realized I couldn't save her. That was the hardest lesson of my life. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes someone has to choose healing for themselves. You can't force it. Over the next several months, I stayed in contact with my brothers almost every day. Quietly, without telling my mother, I helped them prepare in case she actually sold the house. We looked at apartments, discussed finances, made backup plans. Thankfully, the sale never happened. Whether she changed her mind, or simply couldn't bring herself to go through with it, I still don't know. She remains overseas today. We still talk. Not every day. Not even every week. When we do, I avoid conversations about my father. Sometimes she listens. Sometimes she doesn't. She still refuses therapy. She says psychologists can't understand what she's been through. Maybe she's right. Maybe they can't. But I also know this. Pain that isn't treated rarely disappears. It usually finds another target. I refuse to let that target become my children. My husband has stood beside me through every difficult conversation. He's never once told me to choose between my mother and my own family. Instead, he reminds me of something simple. You can love someone without following them into the fire. I think about those words often, especially on the nights when guilt keeps me awake. Because saying no to your own mother doesn't feel brave. It feels heartbreaking. But sometimes, no is the only thing standing between one generation's trauma and the next generation's future. Today, my children know their grandmother as the woman who sends birthday cards from another country. They don't know the full story. Maybe someday they will. Maybe they won't. What matters most to me is that they never grow up believing that screaming is love, that fear is normal, or that revenge is the same thing as justice. If my childhood taught me anything, it's this. Money can disappear. Businesses can fail. Families can fall apart. But the greatest inheritance parents leave their children isn't property. It's the example of how they choose to live after they've been hurt. I couldn't choose my father's betrayals. I couldn't choose my mother's anger. But I can choose what my own children remember. And every single day, I choose peace. So let me leave you with one question. Have you ever loved someone who was so consumed by pain that you realized you couldn't fix them, only protect yourself from becoming part of their destruction? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story found you at exactly the right moment, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.